G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day, and I hope that you made a dawn service this morning and that you're doing something for the celebration and remembrance that Anzac Day is an incredibly special day for. Now today's video is hopefully going to be a bit shorter than usual. I keep promising that, and I know that I never deliver on that promise, but we actually don't have that much to go over today. We need to talk about the final yes from the Senate for the military funding, the security package from the US that's going towards, of course, Ukraine, of which we speak about here, but also towards Israel, Taiwan, and other initiatives. We need to talk about new bills around conscription and what may be happening within Ukraine. And then, of course, we need to look at the maps and some confirmed break-ins as well as expansion of control. Now, one thing that I will say on the US aid is Ukraine overnight has hit as well more oil facilities from Russia. So we have a couple of videos here in the Yetsevo area. So let's have a look at this. So we see massive fire here. Of course, you've got bloody oil and fuel on fire. It burns like hell. You can see these containers here. And then this is geolocated up into this region, some, I believe, 300 kilometers away from Ukraine's borders. Yeah, around about that. So multiple strikes, there's multiple facilities hit there and claims against it. What is interesting about this is the US has really said that they're not super happy about these strikes against facilities, and it is against the US wishes for these facilities. Now, this is defying some of this, but at the same time, Ukraine need to somehow undermine the Russian economy, which has been far more stable than a lot of people predicted. Anyway, let's talk about this aid, and we'll loop back to how that is important and those strikes. It may not be said publicly, but officials, anyone in this, from this aid, they will be expecting results. And something that I hope doesn't come of this is an unprepared offensive this year, of which then has a failure again. That's what I hope doesn't happen. It's a desperation to show results on the front line, and something gets half baked in and it has a complete opposite like we saw last year. But President Biden has then released this video, and we'll talk about exactly what's in this aid package.
We don't walk away from our allies. We stand with them.
You can see here as well, wearing on a lapel pin, a Ukrainian and American flag.
That's what it means to be the indispensable nation. That's what it means to be the world's superpower and the world's leading democracy.
So, released that on his Twitter to go along with this. We can see that overwhelmingly voted in favor of this money going forwards as well. Now, let's continue on with this. So, what exactly is going in? So the defense of Ukraine has put this up, that there's going to be air defense missiles come in. Stinger, we know multiple people that we've spoken to on the front line talk that they need some level of manpad, especially somewhere like Shastov Yar with the Su-25s operating over, as well as even way further out than things like Orlan drones, and a massive amount of ammunition, even for HIMARS as well. Of course, we're going to see ATACMS going as well, javelins. This is all anti-armor stuff. No Abrams tanks, which is interesting in this. We have seen some of those taken out. Is there a replacement for that? We're not sure. But Bradleys, MRAPs, Humvees, and basic mine stuff, night vision, fighting equipment, DEMS, normal stuff, demolitions for obstacle clearing, incredibly important because we know Russia's massive defensive works that have been built and areas that have just been littered with landmines, both Ukrainian and Russian. We know the whole front line, either way, any inch that moves has to be demined, whether it's Russians pulling out Russian mines to continue moving through an area, Ukrainians pulling out Ukrainian or Russian mines to move one way or another. Those landmines are going to be a huge, huge problem into the future. Now, Zelensky had gone to X and says this today: American military aid package for Ukraine is vital. I thank all Americans who work in defense enterprises and every state that manufactures weapons that are now really protecting democracy and our way of life. All of the current cooperation between Ukraine and the United States, as well as every sign of support for our protection, is strengthening both of our nations. They are also strengthening all our partners and the entire world, which wants to live by the rules rather than under conditions of violence and terror. And this is what we know, that narrative is being pushed incredibly hard the last 12 months, that supporting Ukraine is supporting the rest of the world from a war with Russia. But as said here, as I've highlighted, we'll make every effort to compensate for the half year spent in debates and doubts. Now, that money was held up, and of course that had an effect on the front. We must turn everything the occupier has to accomplish during this time, as well as everything Putin intends to do against him. So everything that Russia has made in this time to then switch back. For all of his frontline action, strike on energy system and infrastructure and terror against our cities and villages must unite us all. It is critical that the agreements President Biden and I reached will fully be implemented. Thank you, America. So, of course, that money pushing through. Now, we know those ATACMS, they'll be coming in as well. We know that there's been a lot of speculation that they've already coming in. They're coming in quietly. And, of course, we agree with that with the longer range, as Russia has been saying as well. Something's hitting us longer. We think it's this. So, maybe we're going to think. But there will be more come forward out to 300 kilometres. Now, how much of a difference will these make? Yeah, it will increase capability, but they still won't be allowed to be used within Russian territory. And that, I think, is a linchpin in this entire conflict and support from NATO, the West, whatever you want to say. If there can't be strikes within Russian territory with these weapons, one, yeah, it stops further escalation. But two, I think it's a linchpin in Ukraine's defense. Speaking of ATACMS, then Russian media outlet TASS has said this from Putin, that Moscow adheres to the idea voiced by Russian President Vladimir Putin of creating a buffer zone in Ukraine to protect against long-range weapons. From spokesman Dmitry Peskov, with respect to this, nothing has changed. Speaking about those weapon systems then going in. Now, everyone speaks about Taurus from Germany. Germany's like Scalp, Storm Shadow missile, but again, it's just not going to go in. Reverse is often criticised refusal. Then Scholz has said, as far as the weapon systems you mentioned is concerned, my decision won't change. It's argued that Taurus missiles could only be used responsibly with the involvement of German soldiers, whether inside or outside of Ukraine. We know those leaked phone calls between many senior members of the German armed forces showed this, and the planning that may have gone in there, and I think that phone call leaked too, actually may have had a backflip on they're just not going in. Of course, that's speaking about the Kerch Bridge down here, that they are the perfect weapon to take that out. Potentially the ATACMS can. What is the significance of this bridge? We talk about it every day. I think it has a huge PR significance, military significance. Well, Ukraine's come out themselves and said Russia's now not moving military goods across this. And we know there's a new train line coming from Rostov all the way down to Sevastopol. So, again, we'll see with those ATACMS and see what changes. Now, Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba has then come out with this in an interview with The Guardian. The Western allies need to recognise the era of peace in Europe is over and that Kyiv would inevitably need more help to fight off Russia. That there's going to have to be more beyond just this money. He said, in my belief, that we would have a positive outcome based on the cultivation of religious conservatives, but the West needed to build its defence industry further. So going through of that money. But let's talk about that money in length. So all of this being what happens on the front line, the money, however, we know that we're coming up to elections and Ukrainian aid is already one of the most heated topics that is being debated. And I spoke in the beginning of this video saying without results, well, there needs to be some result. And I think without results from the front, it's going to be very hard for Biden Democrats running into this election to continue selling on the tens and tens of billions of dollars. Because like Kuleba says, like we know, there's going to be more money down the line, and not in billions, but in tens of billions like we have seen. As well as if more strikes go into these Russian oil facilities as well, there's going to be an increase in fuel price as supply and demand around the world. Of course, that undercuts Russia's economy. It's what you do in a war. But again, this is why the US is against those strikes as well. And I hope that Ukraine doesn't undermine some of its US support by going against US or potential US wishes of hitting some of those. Now, some bloggers have actually suggested that the delay in US funding has actually been beneficial. Now, this is using some mental gymnastics, but stay with me for a bit. Saying that it's forced European countries to increase support as US support was dropping. And this has in turn then forced Ukraine to mobilize more men. And because we're leading into an uncertain period of 2025 by the election within the US, that if it was actually announced earlier, if this money was signed off 5-6 months ago, that would already be running dry by now, and it's going to be even more difficult to get one across the line. That maybe this will be a bit of a buffer depending on what happens next year. I know it's mental gymnastics as people, trying to sell this, but if this was the case, tell that to the men on the front line who lost friends while they had no artillery. Now, let's actually have a look at the maps. I did mean to do this first, but I got lost in my own bloody talking. So we have seen some significant changes on the map. Here is Ukraine. Here is the capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupied since 22 and the purple since 2014. So in Bakhmut, we haven't seen any change from yesterday where Ukraine had an advancement north of Klishkivka, but we come down into this Avdiivka front, and this is where a lot is changing, and a lot is changing quickly. Now, here we have Osheretny, so let's have a look here. So we can see there has been an advancement out to the west into Solovov as well. So we see that over the past couple of days, this has moved very quickly and further expansion of control. And you can see this grey zone has expanded a lot out here to the north west. So there is a huge expansion of control happening out there. And what we do know from the intel I was sent yesterday, that this road leading through here is going to be incredibly important, leading through here for both Russia and Ukraine. But Russia won't apparently want to damage this road too bad because they want this to lead into areas like Minograd and Pokrovsk, but it has cut off the way out from places like Berdachi and Semenivka through the best ways out, as well as areas like Keramik now having to use this road all the way up then into Konstantinivka. So that has been more of a problem emerging there. And as you can see, this is the ground confirmed made over the last 24 hours. Of course, these maps will have a bias, so it's potentially more than that. So we have then a Noel reports map here as well, showing similar, if you combine what was said yesterday and today then to this map. Let's zoom in a little bit. So, of course, doesn't show this westerly push out as far as this, but in the center here, showing very similar in that expansion. Now, of course, what we spoke about was everyone saying that Russia's put themselves here in an area where they could be cut off. That was true when it was looking like this, but now that expanded control, that will become more and more difficult as that has expanded. And this is an area which could then see a further collapse down in this front to the second and third line of defenses. There's no way they're going to have a push through here. It's too flat, too open, but maybe an envelopment here as well. So let's have a look then at what Syriac Maps says in this front. Again, showing very similar. Situation north and west of Avdiivka, taking advantage of the collapse of the Ukrainian army at Ocheteny. Russian army captured Altcom brick factory and new urban areas, thus taking control of 60% of the locality. In addition to the southern village of Novobakhmutkivka, close enough, was completely taken and all combats very close to the neighbouring Solovov. Some kilometres south of its Russian forces re-entered again in the cemetery area of Berdachi, so down in here. Moreover, troops increased their salient east of Novokolnovi by taking new positions at the flanks and cut supply route that connects Keramik, Novokolnovi Urban Association with this towards Konstantinivka. So right up in, so you're talking Berdachi down here, this movement out, but as well out from Keramik. This is what we spoke about yesterday. Keramik and this intersection in here coming under danger for further supply in or out. We also have some more footage. This is just a screenshot from it, but there's 2 more videos that have come out of the Russians in this area here. Haven't got that geolocated, but we know there is a significant push down into that area. Now, what we then need to actually do is come just down to the south. I know I've still got one to show you there, but we need to show you Krasnohorivka, as there has been a large advancement here and a confirmed break-in from this map of Russian forces. What we do know is what we've seen from places like Ocheretny, all these areas, that once there's a break-in to occupation is very quick. Krasnohorivka is an area where Russia has been trying to break in and having very, very limited success for a long time. Of course, we have seen the Blyatmobiles and area things like this, but today this map has confirmed definitely a large break-in into this area. We know this area is controlled by FABs and air-launched missiles as well. So we're having this. So to break down of Osseretny, as well as Krasnohorivka. We have this from Syria. Little can be said about the battle for Ochotretny. Ukrainian army has abandoned almost the entire town, leaving only one position to the northeast, and they will possibly abandon as the Russian army continues to comb the rest of the buildings. Meanwhile, in the south, Ukrainian troops begin to evacuate Selivov towards the western defences. The loss of this town will leave the rear of Berdachi completely exposed, so the Ukrainian command will have to make the decision to withdraw to Novopavlovsk or resist the risk of being semi-surrounded by Russian troops in the north, where the heights dominate the plain between the 1st and 2nd Ukrainian defensive line. So, of course, what he's speaking about is between Berdachi, Semenivka, Novopavlovsky, this area in here. What do you actually do as there is a further movement rearwards? Now, Krasnohorivka, where we just then spoke about, Russian army has restarted its assault on the central area of the town, entering some areas of the refactory plant and taking some streets to the south of it. The loss of this plant for the Ukrainian army will mean the loss of its main bastion in the city, after which few large buildings remain there, with the exception of the hospital and the eastern micro-district, which will not be taken directly since the Russian troops will eventually force Ukrainian soldiers to withdraw from there. So will there be a further withdrawal out to the north here? Of course, the whole overarching plan here is to bypass the defensive lines to the north of Ugledar through Novomylivka, Krasnohorivka, and have a further expansion of control out from Donetsk. So Mariinka here, we don't have anything shown on this map. We do have a Syriac here saying, situation southwest Donetsk City. Russian army have made new advances to southeast of Hrorovka. On the other hand, map corrections were made inside the locality as Russian artillery is shelling the schools previously taken but lately retaken by the Ukrainian army. So there has been, of course, some changes in this front, but as far as where this is lining up, look, it is pretty bloody close in here. The map's actually showing similar for once. So that is interesting to see where those changes actually are sitting on the map. And will we see, we know this aid is getting put through. We know it was already staged in Poland and Germany to go in as quickly as it can. Will we start seeing changes on the front ground immediately? Will we, won't we? It's not going to be immediate. Hopefully there's some level of stabilization for Ukraine, but again, it's going to be very hard to actually refill and retake what has been lost. And we do know that in the next coming weeks, that is when we plan to see the highest amount of Russian activity. That's when Ukraine has been warning us out for when, of course, that activity is going to come through and they're going to launch then their full-scale offensive. So again, we just don't know at this point. Now, border guards. We speak about conscription, all this, so we have a little bit to go. So Ukraine's parliament passed a bill raising the number of personnel on state border guard by 15,000. Now, this bill would apply up to 1 year after the cancellation of martial law. So, of course, when the war ends at some point, martial law will end. There'll be an election. I think a lot of people would really like that election now if it was, but it could still go for a year after. But no one voted against the bill. So there was some abstain, but in turn, everyone voted for this bill to increase by 15,000. Now, this bill and this border, of course, where this is it will run across areas like Belarus and down Poland. They're border guards. Now, of course, these guys have been some of the first ones in combat when Russia crossed, say, from Belarus. But as well, we know part of this is going to be stopping Ukrainian guys, men 18 to 60, trying then to leave the border between Ukraine into Romania, Poland, Slovakia, or Hungary. As we know, there's new calls for conscripts. Now, we have this as well that was signed off for consular assistance, that obtaining a passport of citizen of Ukraine, a passport of citizen of Ukraine for travelling abroad, a male citizen 18 to 60 is carried out at the territorial body, territorial subdivision of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Forwarding such passports to a separate unit or foreign diplomatic institution in Ukraine, organisation, blah, 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 is not carried out. So basically, in turn, saying the only way to get a passport if you're in this age bracket and don't have the correct stuff to be travelling on if you have left the country illegally is from within Ukraine, where you have to be registered, mobilised, however that looks from there. But the consular assistance outside of Ukraine has been greatly limited for men in this age bracket. One thing I do talk about is this war has been now over 2 years, coming up on 2.5 years. So someone who was 15 and a half, who may have left as a refugee, is now looking at getting, have to register for this, can't get consular assistance, and may now be illegal. Same as people that may have been living out of the country for a number of years at university, whatever, is coming back in as well. We've seen how Kulaba spoke about these guys who chose to leave or are living out. That I do think if you are, found out to be here and you do return, you're going to be some of the first ones called up. And this is, from everything I see and the friends I talk to, very, very unpopular, and a hole that I don't know how Ukraine plugs. The US, NATO, they can plug artillery gaps. They can plug these industrial holes. As far as manpower, we know the West is not prepared to send in troops. Macron might be talking shit to get some votes, but he's gone awfully quiet. That I don't know how that gets fixed, but let me know. Let me know. Anyway, legends, have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.